My name is Shalia Boyd. Good evening. Today we've decided to honor Dr. David Nathaniel Baker. We're very glad that all of you have decided to help make this a successful occasion. I'd like to ask you to turn off all your cell phones. Thank you. Cell phones. You joined us at Dr. David Baker's alma mater, Crispus Attucks, and this is my alma mater as well. We'd like to hear some scores of our Hoosier legend, and this will be played by some of his students, his friends, and colleagues. I wanted to read a slight bit about Dr. David Baker. He's internationally renowned as a performer, a conductor, a teacher, an author, and composer of numerous jazz and classical compositions. He was a member of the faculty of Indiana University, Jacobs School of Music in Bloomington, Indiana. In that position, he served for 50 years. He's had a National Endowment for the Arts as American Jazz and a Kennedy Center Living Jazz Legend. And as a native of Indianapolis, his musical journey led him from 23rd and Columbia Street on the east side of Indianapolis, where he attended IPS Public Schools 56 and 26, as well as Crispus Attucks and Indiana University. And on his rise and travel, he became world known and the music director of the Smithsonian Jazz Masterworks Orchestra, and for more than 20 years. Let's hear his music and stories about him. Before we do that, we'd like to welcome Dr. Tommy Brown, so he can give us an invocation before we go further.
How do you pray for a fabulous jazz festival? Well, you do it this kind of way. I've sat here and talked to so many people. Music is a language of the heart. Music comes from the divine and from your hearts. So therefore, as we pray, each and every one of you, in your own silent way, let the cosmic spirit speak to you for 7 seconds, and I'll give you closure. Now may the grace and communion of the Spirit of eternity speak to us through this music this day. Let us all say together, Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. The headliner for the musicians today is David Hardiman. He is a trumpeter, and Dr. David Baker and he were neighbors and both graduated from Butler University. He now lives or resides in San Francisco, California, in the Bay Area, where he's retired as a professor emeritus. He's been a jazz musician in jazz studies for the college, City College of San Francisco, and you can follow his link for further information at www.freeweb.com/Hardiman. like to at least announce him now to the podium so you can get to know him before he introduces some selections.
Well, good afternoon. Is it evening time yet? Almost. I'm so happy to see you. I'm glad to be here. I'm honored because you already know, if you don't, you should. Dr. David N. Baker, my good friend, world-class musician. All you have to do is go to David Baker Wikipedia. David Baker, the composer. And there were some things on there that I didn't even know about David Baker. And I've known him since I was a kid because I came up at 2340 Martindale next door to School 56. And David Baker went to the same school as I did. You could go out of my back door and go in the school's back door. And David Baker's father was my mailman. Sometimes the mail would get there and sometimes it wouldn't. But it's okay, because David's stepmother also sang in Eastern Star Baptist Church choir, where my mother, Sadie Hardiman, was one of the founders for that church. I cannot imagine what a mega church. There are 3 churches for the Eastern Star Baptist Church. I just am amazed. But anyway, David Baker, starting out at School 56, 26 like I did, and I was really just honored that I ended up teaching at School 26. Well, in those days, as you know, there were some people that got together and they decided, we're going to have our own school, and it was Crispus Attucks High School. So they gave it to them. It was already integrated before that, in case you didn't know some of the history. So they gave them, they called them Negroes in those days. So they gave them their own school. So this is why Crispus Attucks High School is here. But anyway, David was there at Crispus Attucks. I went to Tech because Roscoe Poland and the music promoters, they decided that they wanted me to go there so I could be integrated, and then I went on to Indiana University, in which I graduated from there in 1959. I started teaching and playing music on the side and playing privately. David Baker, he was just hanging around IU and writing. And the dean of the school decided that you guys, if you don't stop playing that jazz, that you're going to have to leave. And he brought him into the dean's office. And this, I had to graduate as a classical musician. I didn't have any choice because there wasn't any jazz. So Jerry Coker, then Buddy Baker came in. Then they said, okay, J.J. Johnson, we want you to come and be a part of what's happening here, and let's develop a jazz program, because things had started to move. And J.J. said, well, why do you want me to come when you've got somebody right there, David Baker? Ask him to come. And that's when David came in and became the great jazz educator for 50 years. Now, that's a long time, right? So the others, they're going to be able to tell you more about this, but I would see David at the International Association of Jazz Educators Conference, and he was also on the board of directors for the African American Jazz Caucus, but he was also the president of the International Association of Jazz Educators, and he received all those awards. They already told you that he was the director for the Smithsonian Collection, our orchestra. I saw him when I went to DC, and he was directing this orchestra, and I was so proud of him. And I thought, this man is the one that taught me privately. He was working on his book, first book, and had some exercises that he was teaching me about, okay? So I would see David periodically, we'd talk on the phone and so on and so on. So, one of the world's greatest composers. Look, folks, if you don't know it, David Baker was almost as great as Duke Ellington as far as composing music, well over 2,000 plus, as well as symphonic works. It wasn't only jazz, because unfortunately he had this terrible accident in which he could not play the trombone anymore with people like George Russell. So he ended up playing piano, cello, and bass, and writing. So this is why he became one of the greatest people out of Indianapolis, not to mention Indiana. You think Michael Jackson and Babyface and all of them, you might know them from the looks of you. Most of you don't know who they are much. But all the younger folks do. So, but David Baker, he went past them in many respects, musically, okay? So let's just honor this man who was one of the greatest to ever live. He was a genius. Don't forget that. It was just playing around. He was always writing, because if it hadn't been for David Baker, IU's jazz program wouldn't be what it is, nor Jamie Aebersold's program or anybody else. And he brought people like Michael Brecker and Randy Brecker and so many stars that are out there now performing. And it hadn't been for him and Dr. Willis Kirk, people like that. Willis Kirk helped me to go to San Francisco and get started, where I taught for 30 years at City College, taught a total 45 years. How many of my students are here when I taught 11 years ago? Let me see you. Are there any students here? There are a few. I thought I said there was one lady who said that she, oh, here's one. He's going to be playing. All right. Well, I wish I could find all of my thousands of students that I've taught over the years. And it's just one of those kind of things. Okay, time. I could talk on and talk on, but we want to hear the music, don't we? All right, I'm going to introduce folks to you the first segment. Marvin Chandler on piano, Carl Barnett on drums, Raul Padro on percussion, Rudy Fennell on bass, Hank Hankerson on saxophone, Steve Weekly on guitar, and we're going to have Everett Green sing for you. We're going to start off with Stanley Turntine's Sugar. Marvin Chandler on piano, one of the greatest. He used to have a church in San Francisco and have jam sessions at his church till he came back to Indianapolis. Marvin Chandler on piano. He's back here. Mr. Weekly has another gig, so we're he's gonna be here for a little bit yet. So let's give a round of applause for Steve Weekly. And my good friend for many years, we used to play together. Hey, did you know that he was the principal at Shortridge High School? And he's taught a lot of people. And he's still one of those people who's trying to help the IPS to get it together. Al Fennell. And Mr. Barnett is over on the drums. And we have mi amigo, Mr. Padro, on congas, percussion. And I just realized that we played on the same band together with Jimmy Coe's big band when he had his band together. And Hank Hankerson, we came back together again on tenor sax. Well, this man here, last I saw him, he was singing with the Count Basie Big Band. He's been doing those jazz festivals when, they go out on the water and cruise around those big festivals. And then I had him, when Jimmy Coe started the big band for the AAJC, for the IAJE, I played in his band, then it stopped for 1 year, and I said, Larry Ridley, Dr. Larry Ridley, let me put that band back together because the musicians don't have anything to do. So I directed the AAJC big band for 5 years, 2 times in New York, twice in Toronto, and once in Long Beach. And I said, we've got to have one of the world's greatest. Billy Eckstine will never be dead, nor any of those other greats, because he's great himself. Everett Green is, if you haven't heard Everett yet, it's a treat. My good amigo.
Thank you. There will be many other nights like this. We'll be standing here with someone new. There'll be other songs to sing, another fall, another spring, but there will never be another you. There will be many words that we may hear, but they won't fill us like yours always do. I may dream a million dreams, but they will never come true, 'cause there will never, ever be another you. the nights like this, we will be standing here with somebody new. There'll be other songs to sing, another fall, another spring, but there will never, ever be another you. There may be other lips that we may kiss, but they won't thrill us like yours always do. Yeah, you know I may dream a million dreams, but they will never come true if there will never ever be. There will never ever be. There will never ever be another you. Thank you. Thank you.
That was wonderful. I'm enjoying myself. I hope you all are too. This would not have been possible if it wasn't for the great contribution, not of a wife alone, but the contribution of a loving wife and a daughter. So I'd like to welcome April Ayers and Dr. Baker's wife, Lyda, to the stage.
I'm April. Whoa, which one? This one?
This one?
Okay. I'm April, David's daughter, and this is my stepmother, Lyda. And we are so happy to be here and be able to speak on behalf of the family. My cousin, Michael Batts. Stand up, Michael. My cousin, brother, Felix Lastly. My cousin, Paula Lastly. And my husband, Bradley. And also speaking on behalf of my daughter, Kirsten, who's in her 39th week of pregnancy, and we insisted she stay home. Many of you knew Daddy as the jazz master and Indiana living legend, director of the Smithsonian Masterwork Orchestra, or professor at Indiana University Jacobs School of Music. Others of you knew Dad as a family member, a schoolmate, a musician, a colleague, a mentor, a teacher, or a friend. I've had many people tell me over the last 2 months how much Daddy meant to them, how he impacted their teaching, their performance, and more importantly, how he impacted the way they live their lives today. As I was writing this, I was thinking a lot about what Dad would want people to know. How would he want to be remembered? Clearly, he will be remembered for his contributions to music and the arts, but what else would he want you to know about him? Well, he would want me to tell you that he was first and foremost a man who loved the Lord and loved his family. Everything that he accomplished in his personal and professional life, he attributed to God's love and God's grace. Oftentimes when Dad composed, the composition was already completed in his mind before he ever put the first note to paper. In his mind, he had already written all the parts, and it was just a matter of writing it down. He viewed this as his gift from God. He would also want me to say what he always said to me. He would want me to say that, young people, though this is the 21st century and strides have been made, if you are a person of color, you will still have to work twice as hard to get half as far, and you must be ready and able to do your very best every single day. This is how Daddy led and lived his life. He wore a suit and tie to teach each and every single day. The man wore a suit and tie in the summertime. It could be 90 degrees outside, and Daddy would have on a suit and tie. He always arrived early for a professional job, and he was always over-prepared, ready for any eventuality. He was also always the consummate professional. He was kind and giving and always extended grace, but make no mistake about it, when necessary, he would stand his ground and make sure things were done properly. He held himself to an extremely high standard, and his students, like Luke and Frankie and David, will tell you that he held them to the same high standard. That is why Daddy had so many successful students all over the world today. Dad would always say, "I don't expect any more from you than I expect from myself." Dad would also want to be remembered as respectful and kind to every person he ever met. Daddy was invited to the White House under every president from Carter to W. And the way Dad interacted with and treated the President of the United States is exactly the same way he interacted and treated every single person he ever met. He was respectful, kind, and was truly interested in what someone had to say. A colleague wrote a piece recently talking about the swarm. That is what happened when Dad entered a room, and he would be swarmed with people wanting his time and his attention. He gave each person the exact same amount of time. His inner clock was unfailingly accurate and made sure that each person felt as if they were the most important person he had spoken with that day. Dad would also want to be remembered as a person who gave back to his community. Dad achieved the success he did thanks to hard work, thanks to the gift he had from God, and thanks to people like Mr. Brown and Mr. Newsom and all of his other teachers, all of those early teachers who saw so much promise in him. He gave back to the community, he gave back to education, and he helped raise up this next generation of young musicians and teachers. Daddy would want to be remembered as a God-fearing man, a family man, and he truly was a family man. Now, we have an interesting family. There was me, who came from Dad's marriage to my mom, Jeannie, and then there's Lyda, and then my daughter and her granddaughter. Every single Sunday, after church, we all went out to eat. Me, Lyda, Daddy, my mom, my husband, my daughter, her husband, my cousin David Michael, who my dad raised, and his wife and kids. Every single Sunday. My dad was a person who just engendered love and peace and agreement. I kid you not. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every birthday, every Father's Day, and every Mother's Day, all of us as a family, me and my dad and Lyda and my mom and my husband and my daughter and her husband, we spent every holiday together because that's the kind of man my dad was. Thank you.
Wow, how do you follow that? Well, I want to thank all of you so much for being here to share this time with us. I'd like to express my appreciation to the committee. They did a wonderful job of putting this program together, and I'd like to extend a special thanks to them for doing this at Attucks. This was a place that was especially meaningful for David, and he spoke often and fondly throughout his life about his time here. I'd like to also extend my deepest thanks and appreciation to David Hardiman and to Craig Parmerly for their time and effort in putting together the musical portion of this program. And above all, I want to thank all of the wonderful musicians who came to be a part of this program, for participating in the program. Many of them knew David well, and I'm especially grateful to all of you wonderful musicians for being here to help us honor him today. David lived an amazing life. As April said, he was many things to many people. The world knew him best as a performer, as a conductor, as a composer, as an author, and as a distinguished teacher. But he was a father and a grandfather, a husband and a brother, an uncle, a cousin, a son, a nephew, a friend, a colleague, a mentor, and a man of lifelong, powerful faith in his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. For more than 60 years, yes. For more than 60 years, his musical genius took him all over the world. His musical accomplishments were many and in a wide variety of settings. The news of his death was carried by newspapers and wire services throughout the globe, and even the Wall Street Journal. Can you imagine that? The Wall Street Journal published a lengthy and moving tribute to him by a distinguished colleague of his from the Smithsonian Institution, a young man who at one time had been his teaching assistant at Indiana University. People from all walks of life knew him and loved him. And like April said about the swarm, we couldn't walk through an airport. We couldn't sit in a restaurant. He couldn't even go out for a walk, that somebody wouldn't stop him and engage him in conversations that often started like this. Professor Baker, you may not remember me, but I took your jazz improvisation class in 1969, and it changed my life. Or, aren't you David Baker? I saw you on PBS last week on that documentary on Duke Ellington and Billy Strayhorn. Or he'd run into a friend, a fellow musician, somebody who'd say, hey, Dave, where are you on your way to? Oh, you're going to go conduct at the Montreux Festival? I'm going to be there next week myself. I'll see you there. David was born in Indianapolis on the 21st of December, 1931, and let's give our props to the East Side. Grew up on the East Side. He formed lifelong friendships here and kept up with many of his classmates and musical colleagues like Bill Pinnock and Tillman Buggs until the end of his life. He also had a lot of family here in Indianapolis, and that was very important to him. This was the town where he cut his teeth as a musician, and he always knew that music would be his life. In his high school yearbook, in the section where each student would tell his or her career aspiration, he wrote music teacher. He greatly admired and appreciated his teachers at Attucks, especially the music faculty and Mr. Russell W. Brown. They remained dear friends throughout the years, as did others whom he very much enjoyed seeing at class reunions. He was so proud to be from Indianapolis. He loved talking about his early musical life here, and what a wonderful place it was to learn to be a musician. There were great teachers, great mentoring by the older musicians, lots of opportunities to hear and play music. Even if at one point when he was too young to get into the clubs and wanted to hear and learn from the great players of the day, he often bluffed his way in by drawing a mustache on his upper lip with an eyebrow pencil and praying that it wouldn't rain. And then when he would rehearse with the YMCA band, how many of y'all remember doing that? What a thrill it was to be playing a trombone part that had J.J. Johnson's name written at the top. Some of you all know his biography well, and some of you not so well. So here are a couple of highlights that I think you'll enjoy. You'll give you a better understanding of who he was and what he did. For 50 years, and you've heard this before, for 50 years he was a member of the faculty of the Jacobs School of Music of Indiana University, his alma mater. He founded the jazz program and chaired it for 48 years. To read you a list of his outstanding former students, many of whom have gone on to be world famous, like Freddie Hubbard, Randy Brecker, and Chris Bodie, would take the rest of this program. And through their activities and those who follow them as performers, composers, recording artists, and teachers, David's legacy and influence will live on through many, many generations. Outside of the university, he taught in other venues and all around the world. He always said that of all of his many musical activities, teaching was the one thing that was central to everything else. It was the central thing that he did, and it was a calling, truly a calling for him. His dear friend Quincy Jones often said how deeply touching it was to see this in him. Quincy said, David always chose his teaching and his students as his principal calling. The choice to dedicate one's life to helping others achieve their aspirations is a mark of a truly selfless and kind person. In everything he did, David was a truly selfless and kind person. He was the recipient of many awards and much recognition, but remained a humble, generous, truly good person throughout his life. He overcame countless obstacles without becoming bitter, and worked tirelessly to leave the world a better place than he had found it. He was always encouraging others and leading by example, and used stories from his own life of overcoming extremely difficult circumstances as inspirations for others not to ever give up. He would often tell the story of his first encounter with a musical instrument and a music teacher, who will remain nameless, of wanting to play an instrument and having his parents rent an instrument for him to begin to study, and then having the money returned for the instrument rental fee to his parents with the advice to direct David to another path because he had absolutely no musical talent. Undaunted, he went on to become a Kennedy Center Living Jazz legend, a National Endowment for the Arts American Jazz Master, received a presidential appointment to the National Council on the Arts, and the list goes on and on. In 1962, he endured and triumphed over a situation that required all of the formidable willpower, courage, and determination that he could muster when he learned on the same day and in the hospital that he had won the New Star Award on trombone from Downbeat magazine, and that his doctors were giving him the news that as a result of complications from injuries he had suffered years earlier in an automobile accident, that he would never play the trombone again. His response? Choosing new instruments to learn. You've heard that he went to the piano. David Hardman talked about that. Went to the bass, went to the cello. He resumed his performing and recording career, expanded his activities as a composer, and continued to teach. And as a talented young black musician auditioning for the Indianapolis Symphony, and incidentally, he won the audition, but was told that he could not be hired because the symphony board would never approve it. He went on to have an influential, although injury-shortened career as a jazz trombonist, and to become an award-winning composer of classical works for symphony orchestras, chamber ensembles, and soloists. Imagine not being hired by the Indianapolis Symphony for their trombone section and then going on to compose on commission for the New York Philharmonic and to conduct his own works with the Tokyo Symphony. Now here's an interesting point. Not many musicians or composers are recognized as being exceptional in both the jazz and classical fields, but David was. I remember the vice president of BMI, which is a performing rights organization like ASCAP that handles both classical and jazz composers. I remember him saying one time that David was so prominent in the classical music world that many classical people weren't even aware of his extraordinary career in jazz, and vice versa. David was known in the profession as a musician's musician. He was the consummate professional, always prepared, and always knowing how to get the best from everyone he worked with, treating them with respect, affection, and humor. And he never took leaders' fees on his union gigs. He always took the same pay as all the other musicians. The musicians that he conducted and performed and recorded with had great love and respect for him. The members of the Smithsonian Jazz Masterworks Orchestra, of which he was the conductor, artistic and musical director for nearly 25 years, used to say that they would walk through fire for him. And they were not alone in the profession. He always treated people the way he wanted to be treated himself, and continually reminded his students to do the same if they wanted to be successful and happy in their lives. He was a very generous person with his time, with his resources, and with his recommendations of people for teaching and playing positions, and in so many other ways. He was proud and honored by the number of scholarships that were set up in his name, and the educational opportunities they would make possible for talented but financially challenged young musicians. He served on boards and at the highest level of numerous professional organizations, and as president of the International Association for Jazz Education, never even took a per diem for his air travel, for his hotel, for his meals, preferring that that money stay with the organization to help further its mission. He would make time for others when they needed his advice, expertise, or encouragement. I saw him work with everybody from rank beginners who were just learning their fingerings to seasoned professionals like his dear friend James Moody, always with the graciousness and good humor that was an integral part of his personality. He was a perennially intellectually curious person and had many interests. He was a lifelong learner with an enormous personal library spanning a wide variety of subjects. He loved language and wordplay and was known as a world-class punster. He had a sharp, quick wit and delighted in engaging other bright minds in heavy discussions and light conversations alike. He loved college and professional basketball, especially Indiana University's Hurricane Hoosiers and the Los Angeles Lakers, having been a Lakers fan since Jerry West's playing days. He followed boxing with great enthusiasm, having had a brother and a cousin who were both champion fighters. I could go on, but I hope this has given you just a little glimpse of who this great man was and what he accomplished in his 84 years on this earth. He was a wonderful person, a genuinely good human being, and he achieved one of his greatest ambitions with his last breath. He never retired from Indiana University, having taught his last student just a few weeks before he died. What a great life, and what an honor and a privilege it was to share his journey. Thank you.
You're welcome. You did good. It was great. Thank you.
What a very touching and loving tribute to someone who's given so much, and it takes a good woman behind every man, every good man. We're going to bring Mr. Hardiman back to the stage, to the microphone, so that he can start another musical tribute.
You know, David he had a great sense of humor, but being from Indiana and being what we call a brother, well, the brother knew about Kentucky oysters. And see, a lot of people didn't know what Kentucky oysters were. But see, if you go back to even slavery days, what they threw away that the other people wouldn't eat, that's when they had Kentucky oysters. And now some people consider it a very special delicacy. So we're going to play David Baker's Kentucky Oysters.
Good afternoon. Oh yeah, this is much better. Good afternoon, and I am honored to be in the company of the Baker family and all of you and all these very talented musicians, which we have heard from already, and which you will hear from in the future. And I'm here as a former student of Dave Baker, I would encourage everyone who has a program to look on the back, because it really, I think, captures at least my experience of Dave Baker, David Baker. I can't think of anything much more honorable than teaching young people to be decent, to be successful. Teaching is such a sacred act to show somebody about life. I teach under jazz, but what I teach is living. And I became a student of Dave Baker when I couldn't even drive a car. He was still playing trombone. I think I was in middle school. And when I became a student of David Baker, I was what you would call a musical mess. I was playing trumpet, but my armature was all wrong. And I was trying to play this rather ambitious musical piece for a competition. I think most educators know about these competitions that are held each year so that students in middle school and high school can perform, and then they're graded with a first place, second place, or third place. Well, I had this very ambitious trumpet piece I was trying to play when I met David Baker as a teacher. And so he didn't scold me, reprimand. He, basically knew that this was way more than I could handle, but he kind of helped me with it. And then after I got past the competition, then we started working on my armature, and we got that straightened out. And then from, I would say, the 8th grade or 9th grade up until the time I finished high school, he was my music teacher. Introduced me to many jazz musicians, Freddie Hubbard, Wes Montgomery. On his own, took me to the Notre Dame Jazz Festival. And so he was more than just a teacher. He was my first real professor in the sense of what life is all about. I apologize, I'm getting over a cold, so please bear with me. But the reason why I wanted to give that background is I, unlike some of the others that you have heard from and will hear from, took a different path. And so 20 years after my introduction to David Baker, I was in law school and taking a class. I didn't like the grade that I got in the class. And so in law school, if you don't like a grade and you want to challenge it, you have to set up a separate meeting with the professor. And they have a model answer, and you go over the model answer. And then if things can be adjusted, they are. If not, your grade is your grade. So I set up the meeting. The meeting didn't go favorable to me, but anyway, after the meeting was over, I asked the professor what I could do next semester, because I had the second part of the same class, to improve my performance. And so what the professor said was, really, I don't think you're law school material. And what you really should do is stop now, not waste your money. And he didn't say these words, but basically he was saying, don't waste my time, And so, and then I also, later before I finished law school, there was another professor where I challenged a grade. That professor had to give me a better grade because of the challenge, but he also said, what do you plan to do when you finish law school? And I said, well, I'm not sure, maybe work in banking or whatever. He said, well, you'll be okay as long as you don't practice law. So I say this because I'd been introduced to Professor David Baker early in life, and the way he met me where I was, didn't scold me or reprimand me for my ambitions, but showed me how to improve and helped me become the better musician I was later in life. And so I say that to say that he was more than just a musician, he was a master educator. And one of the key lessons that I have learned from him is not only don't let anybody set barriers for you, because there's no ceiling for you other than the ceiling you set for yourself. But the other point is to meet people where they are and to work with them from where they are. And as all of us who know David Baker, he never said an unkind word to anyone, never let anyone feel that they couldn't accomplish what they wanted to accomplish. So we will humbly submit, I remember Clifford, but for me I remember Professor Baker.
Once again, Judge David Shaheed, please. And the band. At this particular moment, we're going to do a little edumacation thing. I'm going to bring out one of Indy's fine piano players. He also wrote a poem that David penned music to. It's called Now That He Is Safely Dead. Would you welcome Mr. Carl Hines as he give us the litany. Come out and give me the litany of what's happening. As they say, this is your life. So I'm going to give you this microphone and you tell folks what's happening.
Hello, everybody. My name is Carl Hines. I graduated from Tennessee State in '62. I came to Indianapolis in '64 to teach in this very building. I was a math teacher. A lot of people don't know that I was a math teacher. Everybody assumes I was a music teacher, but I was actually a math teacher. Algebra, geometry, trigonometry, all that good stuff. Some of the people on the stage were in my math class, believe it or not. But anyway, it happened to be that I was teaching here during the time of the assassination of Dr. King. I wrote a poem about it, which spoke to the hypocrisy of the way he was viewed, especially in the South, before this event and after the event. It was called Now That He Is Safely Dead, and let us praise him now that he is safely dead. So it was a deep honor that David chose to put music to this poem on at least 3 different occasions. Once for the 5th Jubilee Singers, and that was a high honor for me because going to college in Nashville, I was well acquainted with the Jubilee Singers and the role that they had played in the history of American music. And it was a part of the Martin, Malcolm, and Medgar concert, and several other occasions. And I think they're going to play a bit of that now. David's treatment of a poem that I wrote called Now That He's Safely Dead. Thanks.
To his glory. Sing hosannas to his name. Such convenient heroes. They cannot rise to challenge the images. To build monuments. children that he was a great man, knowing that the cause for which he lived is still a cause, and the dream for which he died is still a dream. A dead man's dream.
All right, now that we've done that, that's the music that David put together for the poem up on Mr. Carl Hines. Now, we're back to the musical portion of the program. Miss Vicki Daniels, where you be? Where you be, Vicki? Vicki, come on. Let's get it. Get it on. You're ready, Vic. You're up. Miss Vicki Daniels.
Thank you. Hello, thank you. I love Mr. David Baker. He is a genius. You know what? I'm going to tell this one story. I know y'all don't have much time. I was in line with him, and he had made this most amazing sandwich. And I was behind him, and I said, Mr. Baker, will you make me a sandwich? And he said, poof, you're a sandwich. Thank you, Brother Mr. Baker.
Vicki Daniels, Vicki Daniels. David Hardeman and company. We're going to flip the switch here, and we're going to have some young folk come up here and present us with some of the educational music. Luke, where are you, Luke? Luke, where did Luke go? Okay, where are the young ones at? Right there. So there. So this portion is where we get to showcase some of Mr. Baker's wonderful education that he passed down to many of us, be it written, musical, or just plain old everyday David Baker. But there was always something in that everyday David Baker. Trust me. It was always good. So, with that said, I'm looking for, oh, there she be. Oh, she over there. And this young lady, you've already met her once, but you know, together they go, together they stand. Luke Gillespie, Mrs. David Baker.
Is that the song?
Should we use this one?
Okay, go ahead.
Should we use this one?
All right.
I am so happy that this trio has come up from Bloomington to play for you today. I've known Luke for a long time. We've played together, we've recorded together, we've worked together. He's a protege of David's, one of the finest jazz pianists to come out of our program, and now is a professor in the Jazz Studies Department at Indiana University. And the two young men who will be playing with him today, Quinn Sternberg on bass and Josh Roberts on drums, are two more of our really exceptional students. David not only taught them at Indiana University, but he took them to the Ravinia Festival as part of a prestigious program for young artists who are identified as being people who will have a major career in the music someday. So we're so happy to present this trio to you. They're going to play three of David's compositions, three of what I think are his best compositions. They're tunes that we've played together for years with David, and he loved playing on them. The first one is a tune, a bossa nova called An Evening Thought, which he wrote for his very dear friend, Marian McPartland. Some of you may know her from her NPR series, Piano Jazz. The second tune is a slow 12/8 blues called An After Hours Lament. And the third tune is an up-tempo bebop tune, which is a contrafact on Half Nelson. A contrafact is a tune that you write using the chord changes for a previously written tune, and you write a new melody on it. And David was a superb melodist. I always felt like that was one of his greatest gifts, both as a classical composer and as jazz composer. He wrote just incredible melodies and wonderful, fun harmonic sequences to improvise on. So this is the Luke Gillespie Trio from Bloomington, Indiana, from Indiana University. We hope you'll enjoy it. And Luke is going to share a story with you because...
Just because.
Just because.
Thank you, Lyda. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, first, let me say it's an honor to be here. And I noticed in the program it said the students of David Baker will be playing. And even though I've been on the faculty at Indiana University now for a number of years, I was also a student of David Baker. So I hope I count, along with these two young guys who I taught in one class or another. I just want to share one story with an encounter I had with David Baker when I was very young. And this encounter changed my life. And it was when I was 18. And I went into his office, and I was a classical piano major at that time. But I love jazz, and I was learning to play jazz. My father was a huge fan of Nat King Cole. And most people don't know that he was a fantastic pianist, not just a singer. And so I listened to some of Nat King Cole's records when I was a young boy. And my father also loved the Mills Brothers. And that's where I learned to hear some standards for the first time. Well, I got to David's office when I was 18. I had already bought his book, and I looked through all the chapters, and I made sure I did all the assignments. And I played for him, and it was the first day of class. And he said, "You're a classical piano major?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You're welcome to be a jazz piano major if you like." I was thrilled. I went down to the undergraduate office and I said, "I'm switching my major from classical piano to jazz piano." So he changed my life, and I just was talking to somebody the other day. I've actually, both of my parents died when I was in college, so I've actually known him real close as a mentor and almost as a father. I've known him longer than anyone else in my life, other than my siblings. And the impact he's had on my life is can never be, I can never thank him enough. So I'm very honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Betty Shaw will be the next to present information to the audience. Thank you.
I need to know if you're enjoying yourself. All right. We have the next singer who is a European recording artist, Miss Sandy Lomax. Yeah, that's right. She has sung with Nat Adderley and Slide Hampton and under, thank you, Big Apple Records. Let's bring on Sandy Lomax.
All right. How's everybody doing? I'm going to do a Miles Davis tune. One, two, three, one, two, 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 two.
You got dark and sad, or bright and glad. You know there are blues, are shades, are hues, are blues, are shades, are hues, are blues, are shades, are hues. Talking about those Miles Davis blue, whoa, 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 yeah. Dum da ding da dum ba dee da dum ba doo doo dee doo dee da doo doo dum da doo doo dee da doo da ha doo doo ba ba doo da dee da dum sha doo dee da doo da ha doo ba dee da doo 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 doo. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. How about that scatting? Would the Reverend Dr. Thomas Brown please come to the stage? Thank you. Thanks. We would like for Mrs. Lyda and Mrs. April to please come to the stage. We have some presentations for Lyda and April, and Thomas will give the first one.
To this beautiful family. And just to tell you something in advance, the 1st of January 15th, 2017, we celebrate Martin Luther King Day celebration and the Drum Major Award. So posthumously, you will be receiving that at the St. John Missionary Baptist Church in regard to David Baker. But for this time, we want to acknowledge David Baker, outstanding leadership and contribution to music. We also want to especially thank his entire family for their support in helping him to achieve his award, his legacy to the arts and society from the Indiana Christian Leadership Conference. May God bless and keep you.
God bless you.
Our next award comes from the mayor of Indianapolis. He says, "Dear Mrs. Baker and family, on behalf of the city of Indianapolis, please accept my expression of sympathy for the recent loss of your husband, David N. Baker. It is an honor to send greetings to all who will gather at Crispus Attucks for his special musical tribute. As a proud native Hoosier, David's musical journey began near the intersection of 23rd and Columbia Streets on the east side of Indianapolis. He attended local Indianapolis public schools 56 and 26, Crispus Attucks, graduated from Indiana University with a bachelor's and master's degree in music education. His life journey included a rise to the top of the jazz world, and all along his way, he made the world a kinder, more gentle place with his music. Internationally renowned jazz musician, composer, chairman of the Jazz Studies Department at IU, and artistic and musical director of the Smithsonian Jazz Masterworks Orchestra, David influenced many of today's jazz performers. In addition, through his special musical gift, he impacted the lives of many in our community, and his memory will be long treasured by those who heard him and those who loved him. My thoughts and prayers are with you as you pay tribute to David's life. May you be comforted by your memories of his commitment to your family and community. Sincerely, Joseph Hoxell.
Thank you.
The next tribute is from Andre Carson. To the friends and family of David Baker, it's an honor to join you today to celebrate the memory of David Baker. David touched countless lives through his music and writings, and the success he enjoyed in his illustrious career is a testament to the hard-working, it was screaming, that's the reason why I didn't do that, to the hard-working and dedicated man he was. Though his accomplishments are numerous, David will be remembered most for his steadfast commitment to his students. He chose not to keep his talents for himself, but to selflessly pass them along to others so that they might also fall in love with creating music. David has left a legacy at Indiana University and in the larger jazz community, and his memory will not soon be forgotten. The city of Indianapolis is privileged to be the place David called home. It has and continues to be beneficial from his contributions. This memorial concert is just another way that David will leave his footprint on this city and on the music community. I hope that through this concert and scholarship fund, we remember David's full and happy life. I pray that we all strive to imitate David's selfless attitude and kind spirit. With sincere sympathies, Andre Carson, Member of Congress. Last but not least, and I'm not going to read it all, it's a proclamation from City County Council of Indianapolis, Marion County. A proclamation recognizing David N. Baker. Whereas David was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, he attended local Indianapolis Public Schools 56 and 26 and is a graduate of Crispus Attucks High School. As an Indiana native, he started his musical journey near the intersection of 23rd and Columbia Streets. He thrived on the Indianapolis jazz scene, serving as a mentor to Indianapolis-born trumpeter Freddie Hubbard. And whereas Dr. Baker was educated at IU, Indiana University, earning the Bachelor of Music degree in 1953 and the Master of Music in 1954, his first teaching position was at Lincoln University in Jefferson, Missouri in 1955, a historic Black institution where he had to resign his position under threats and violence. Oh my goodness. Whereas Dr. Baker taught in the Jazz Studies Department at IU, he was a member of the faculty at IU's Jacobs School of Music for 50 years. As an educator, he helped make IU a highly regarded destination for students of jazz. Be it proclaimed by the City County Council of the City of Indianapolis and of Marion County, Indiana, Councilor Vop Ostley proudly recognizes the life and legacy of musician Dr. David N. Baker. Councilor Ostley extends his appreciation for the contributions Dr. David has made in the jazz community. We are presenting one to the wife and one to the daughter. Thank you.
Thank you, sweetie.
Very sweet. Thank you
You
so
worked so
much.
hard. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. We hope you have enjoyed the evening. I would like to say a special thanks to all of the musicians who gave of their time, their energy, everything else that they gave of. We're happy. Most of them have left because they have other gigs, but that's okay. As our last hurrah, I would like to call up the individuals on my committee who helped us do this, and without them, there's no way it could have happened. I would like to bring up, when I call your name, please come forward. Ralph Adams, Shalia Boyd, Virgil Boyd. Has everybody gone home? Reverend Dr. Tommy Brown, Mark Bryan, Shirley Cannon, David Hardiman, Craig Parmerly, and Sparky Smith. Come to the front of the stage, please, and be recognized. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone. Thank you for coming. Have a safe trip home.